there was ever a Pokemon game where you needed to know what every single shiny Pokemon looked like, it's Scarlet and Violet, because if you don't know what they look like, you're probably gonna miss them. We're gonna break down every single shiny in the game right now. All right, let's just dive in, man. We got Sprigatito, which you cannot shiny hunt the starters at the beginning, but it's got a nice little green coloring. I like its evolved form, of course. We've got Floragato, and then you go into Meowscarada, but this one you have to hash for anyway. Fuecoco, Crocolore, and then Skeledirge, which look pretty cool. They've got like a little pink vibe going on for them. And then we've got Quaxly, Quaxwell, and Quackavall, which are a little bit disappointing if I'm being honest. But then we move to the ones you can actually hunt for that'll pop up in the overworld. And again, just a reminder, there's no sound or audio cue when a shiny pops up. You have to visually be able to identify it. We've got Lechonk here, turns a little pink piggy, which is super duper adorable. And then its evolved form, of course, which is Oinkologne, which is pretty sweet. And there's actually another form of Oinkologne in case you're wondering, but they both look pink, so it should be a pretty obvious standout for you there. Tarantula has a beautiful red kind of spin web thing going on behind its back, which looks awesome. And then you've got Spidops, which kind of has like a pinkish kind of vibe, also stays black. These are pretty obvious ones in the early game, so luckily those early game shinies, when you kind of get your first routes going on, are pretty obvious. And most of the shinies in this game are relatively obvious, but there's a few more subtle ones for sure. We've got my boy Nimble and Lowkicks, which look amazing with that gold coloring. They go yellow and gold and black, and that just looks so good. Definitely one of the shinies I want to hunt the most in this game. There's no doubt about it. You can definitely find that one, but I'll tell you, Nimble is very small on the map, so keep an eye out for that gold coloring. And now is actually a perfect time to tell you guys about our brand new merch drop at TeamShiny.com. Seriously, we dropped a ton of new shirts, including legendaries, early game Pokemon starters, and much, much more. Head over to TeamShiny.com and pick up some of this sweet merch today. You can use code STELLAR to get 15% off if you pick up 3 t-shirts or more, so be sure to check back regularly for awesome Team Shiny merch drops representing Scarlet and Violet. We've got some great merch there, so don't miss out. Deck out your closet today and rep the new Pokemon games in the Paldea region. Rellor and Rabsca are really cool. Rellor basically pushes around a golden nugget, which is pretty dope. And then you've got Rabsca, which is golden. It's like a golden scarab with his big psychic orb above him. Greavard and Houndstone kind of have a similar color, yellow, goldish. I will say Houndstone is a little harder to find, but you won't see too many Houndstones on the map. You'll mostly find Greavard, so they should be pretty obvious, but you have to make sure they pop out of the ground because you're only going to see the candle first. Then you've got Flittle and Espathra. Flittle's going to be hard to see because that thing is super duper small on the map. Espathra will be pretty obvious because of the black coloring. You can always use the Let's Go feature to send your Pokemon into auto battle, and remember, they will not battle against a shiny, so if you're ever confused, that's a surefire way to know. And don't forget, you can always save if you find a shiny, and if you fail it, you can just restart your game and it should still be there without a problem. Just make sure auto saves off. Our boy Farigiraf basically keeps the same color pattern as we had before with Girafarig, which is pretty sweet, so you gotta love that. And I actually forgot the Dunsparce earlier, but it looks like Dunsparce, so it's pink. You won't miss it. Wiglet, the new convergent form of Diglett, has the blue nose that we all know and love, and it should be pretty obvious since it's like gold and blue, so you shouldn't have any trouble seeing that. And then Wugtrio actually is blue as well. So again, these are really, really obvious shinies that stand out to you. It should be pretty obvious. And one of the things I love about this game is they have Pokemon spawn in clusters with each other oftentimes. So if there is a shiny in there, you can often see it looks a little different in the context of the other Pokemon that are with it. Then we've got the Donzo, which goes from blue to this big golden yellow color, which is pretty sweet. And Veluza goes from purple to green. So again, very obvious shinies. You should have really no hard times finding them. You can get Finizen or Palafin. They look pretty similar to the original form, so this is probably one of the more subtle changes. It goes to like a deeper purplish color as opposed to the blue. So this is one you definitely want to look out for. I would say just be mindful of this one, and again, use the auto battle feature. I love the Smoliv line. Smoliv, Dolib, and Arboliva all have black olives on them, which I think is so clean. I'm a big fan of that. I think people are really gonna dig that one. So definitely be sure to keep an eye out for those black olives as you're kind of working your way around the region. Capsicum and Scovillain are more subtle. They kind of change from their green to a more yellow color, and that's really it. So this is one you definitely want to keep an eye out for because it's gonna be hard to notice. Then you've got Tadbulb and Bellibolt, and they kind of have like a really bright yellowy kind of green color that Pokemon likes to use, and they have like the black bodies with a little bit of red on them. So this one should stand out relatively easily, and I think you'll be able to notice it pretty quickly. Pretty sweet shiny in my opinion, actually, for an electric type. Then you've got Varoom and Revavroom, which are very interesting. This is probably one of the harder ones to notice, but you've got that gold kind of engine on it. It looks pretty dope. So if you see those things floating around in the kind of deserty area, you'll know that that one's shiny. Orthworm goes from red to blue. This is one of the coolest shinies in the game in my opinion, and you definitely want to keep an eye out for this one. Once you do the Titan quest, these Orthworms kind of pop up everywhere, but again, they'll have to be buried in the ground, so just keep an eye out for them, so that way you engage with them, they pop out, and you can make sure if they're blue or not. Tandemaus and Mousehold, they kind of have a very subtle shiny. This is probably one of the hardest shinies to recognize in the game, so again, just keep an eye out for it. Use the auto battle feature to fight this little family of mice, and make sure that you're not missing any shinies when you're tracking them down. Seatottle and Titan might actually win the award for my favorite shiny in the gen so far. They go from like kind of a white color to more gray, and then Titan's a little more obvious with the black on it. You're probably gonna see Seatottle more frequently, so just keep an eye out for that gray color and the orange on its eyes. That'll be your telltale signs. But again, this is one where you're probably going to want to use auto battle just to be sure. Frigibax, Artibax, and Baxcalibur are your pseudo legendaries. This is another one that's really subtle. Like, it's not a huge difference. The dude's so adorable, by the way. Not a huge difference. So when you do see like a Frigibax or something like that, just be mindful that its color scheme is not all that different when it comes to its shiny. Tatsugiri actually has multiple shiny forms based on the form of Tatsugiri you find. So this one's like a whole mess. I don't even know what to tell you all about this, but it does have multiple shiny forms apparently. So again, this one, the Pokemon is very small on the map. It's very hard to run into. So just be super mindful of that. Use your auto battle feature, as I've said a bunch of times in this video. Cyclizar has a unique color pattern. It goes from like kind of that green and white to a more goldish dark green color. So it should be pretty obvious to point out. You shouldn't have any problems spotting Cyclizar. Pretty sweet shiny too. Then you've got Palmy's line. You got Palmy, Palmo, and Palmot, and they kind of go to like a reddish pink. So this one stands out a ton. Shouldn't have any problem seeing it. It's a great shiny. I just honestly hate how it evolves, man, personally. Like, I love Palmy. I think it's adorable, but its evolutions, I feel like, are very uninspired. Then you've got Wattrel and Kilowattrel, which kind of are very subtle, right? This isn't a huge difference in shiny. It kind of changes from the black to kind of a slightly different coloration. The hues on the orange, the saturation is like turned up a little bit. So this is one that you're gonna want to keep your eye out for as well, because it's a little harder to recognize. Then you've got Bombardier, which is a pretty sweet one. It actually goes like full white, looks really clean. This is a really good shiny. I love black and white shinies. Bombardier is one to look out for. They float above you, so just keep an eye above the ground. Squawkability has a bunch of different forms, so keep an eye on those. They're different colors, they're different forms. That's gonna be a tough one to identify, because you're gonna be like, wait, they all have these different forms. But again, that's one where the saturation is different, so hopefully it stands out to you. Flamigo goes to a lighter pink as opposed to like the reddish color, and generally they're seen in flocks, so it should be relatively easy to point out. Cloth is definitely one of the best shinies in the game in my opinion. It goes from kind of that reddish, kind of dusty color to this bright blue, much like Orthworm. That is super cool. I love these bright blue shinies. It reminds me of like Fracture shiny. Definitely one of the best ones. And another one that's awesome, Knackley, Knacklestack, and Garganackle. You've got the big rock dudes. They turn to like gold, so goldish orange. So that one should pop out at you like so obviously. There's no doubt that you'll find that thing easily. Glimmet and Glamora are a little tougher though. They do change the color blue that they are, but Glimmet is so small, and Glamora, they're often in caves and stuff where it's hard to view them. So this is one you want to keep your eye, really glued on them Pokemon, because it's going to be hard to notice. Probably one of the toughest ones is going to be Shroodle. In the early game, it's very hard to identify Shroodle. The biggest thing is you're going to look at its eye color. This is again where your auto battle feature comes in handy. And Grafaiai is very similar, right? It's a hard one to see because there's a lot going on with its design. So this is a shiny you got to keep your eyes open for. Then you've got Fido and Darkspun, another one that's pretty subtle if we're being honest here. This one doesn't just jump out at you. So some of these later shinies here are a little bit harder to recognize. Then we got Mastiff and Mabostiff. This should stand out pretty easily, I would say, especially Mastiff, because it goes from like that reddish color. You shouldn't have any problems identifying the shiny. It's pretty sweet too. Then you've got Bramblin and Bramblegast, another one that's tough because often you're gonna see this Pokemon in like the sandstorm or the desert, so it's a little hard to identify. So it does stand out. It is a little bit different, but it's a small sprite and it's moving pretty quickly, so keep an eye out on this guy. Then you've got Gimmighoul and Goldengo. Gimmighoul you're gonna pretty much encounter anyway, so you shouldn't have too many issues. Like, you'll battle against it and it'll sparkle or it won't sparkle, and you're gonna want to get those treasure chest ones anyway to get a lot of coins to be able to get Goldengo, and Goldengo should be pretty obvious anyway. I think you have to get Gimmighoul, so it shouldn't be a problem. Then we move to our Paradox forms. You've got Iron Treads. This one's pretty straightforward, man. It has a different colored body. It's got the yellow on it instead. It's got kind of the Donphan nose, which looks really dope. You've got Amoonguss, basically the new Amoonguss one, which is a Brute Bonnet, I think actually it's called. Brute Bonnet has the blue Master Ballish color, so you shouldn't have problems there. Then we've got Sandy Shocks, which goes full black, looks so dope. Screamtail is a little tough to notice. The eyes are usually the giveaway there. Fluttermane goes straight Misdreavus, so it should be very easy to identify. And Slitherwing, one of the coolest ones, goes kind of similar to Volcarona Shiny, where it changes those color palettes to being more yellowy. And then Roaring Moon does the same thing as regular Salamence, where it goes green instead, so that looks really dope. Iron Treads actually looks phenomenal with the red on its treads. I actually think that's so sick. And then you go to Iron Moth, which does a very similar thing as well, with kind of the Volcarona vibes, where it kind of changes that color to like an orangey yellow. Iron Hands goes very, very yellow in like super steel mode, looks pretty dope. But some of these Violet Paradox forms are very hard to identify. You've got Iron Jugulus, again, very hard to identify. Iron Thorns has kind of the greenish color on it. And then you've got Iron Bundle, which has kind of the blue. Then onto Iron Valiant, which has the pink. These should be easy to identify in the context of like when you run into these Paradox forms, they're often with other Paradox forms, so they should stand out relatively decently. And then you've got the legendaries. You've got Ting Lu, Chen Pao, Wo Chen, and Chi Yu. Unfortunately, by the way, Chi Yu may be the best shiny in the game after I see it now. These are shiny locked as far as I know. So that's a little disappointing. At this moment in time, I believe they are shiny locked. And I think Koraidon and Miraidon might be shiny locked as well. Don't quote me, I'm not 100% sure on that. We're still waiting on the full data mine, but these look awesome. Koraidon wins the shiny war between the two, and that's one of our brand new Team Shiny shirts as well. Then you've got Tinkatink, Tinkatuff, and Tinkatun. Look for the hammer. That's gonna be your key indicator here on this shiny. Charcadet, Armarouge, and Ceruledge all look really cool, but pretty subtle shinies as well, so you're gonna probably want to use the auto battle feature on the Charcadets to make sure you don't miss it. Toedscool and Toedscruel both look pretty sweet. Toedscruel being the more obvious of the shinies, Toedscruel going full white. Pretty sweet shinies, actually. And then King Gambit keeps Bisharp's colors with the blue, so that one should stand out pretty well. Clodsire and Wooper are a little tough, though. Like, you lose the brown, you kind of get like this purplish gray. Should be able to identify, but again, it might be a little tough. And then Annihilate, I don't know if you can even encounter it in the wild, so just look for Green Primeape otherwise, or Mankey. The Paldean Tauros forms look very similar to the original forms, so this is one where they're often in a horde together. I don't think you ever see Tauros by itself, so just really keep an eye on those Tauros forms because, again, you're looking for the most subtle changes on those. And that's pretty much that. That's your full shiny dex for the Paldea region, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. If this video was helpful, like the video and subscribe. And don't forget to check out Team Shiny to pick up some sweet merch and more. We just dropped a bunch of designs, and you can use code STELLAR to get 50% off your purchase right here, right now. Thanks so much for watching this one. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.